Good evening from the Asia Europe Foundation here in Singapore. My name is Leonie Nagarajan and I'm from ASEF's Education Department and will be your host today. Together with my colleagues from ASEF Edu, as we call it, Freya Chaupol and Quentin Fayed, I warmly welcome you to the 4th ASEF Young Leaders Summit on Sustainable Development in a post-COVID-19 world. This ASEF Young Leaders Summit is the official youth event of the 13th ASEM Summit, which is currently hosted by the Government of Cambodia. This 13th ASEM Summit takes place today and tomorrow, and about 30 minutes ago, the opening ceremony of this political meeting took place, and we were really proud that we had 3 youth participants joining this opening ceremony and delivering an ASEM Youth Declaration to 53 ASEM leaders. And these 53 ASEM leaders are 51 prime ministers, presidents from 51 ASEM countries, Asian European countries, plus leaders from the European Union and the ASEAN Secretariat. So we very much hope that these youth voices, their voices were heard by the ASEM leaders. We hope that their call for action, which they have developed, will be followed up by the ASEM governments. And most importantly, we hope that this youth intervention and their call will contribute to more inclusive leadership in the sense that youth will be more engaged, better engaged in consultation processes and in policy making when it comes to sustainable development and our joint future. So in this regard, this ASEM Youth Report on Leadership pre-launch panel, which we are organizing now, is absolutely right on time. I have several youth leaders and experts with me here on board, and we want to look into youth leadership, into opportunities, barriers of youth leadership, the current status quo of youth leadership in Asia and Europe, and also see what are the recommendations. How can young people be more empowered? How can they develop better? And really, how can we use the full potential of our youth to create a better, more sustainable future for all? So I'm pleased to welcome 4 representatives from the youth sector, and they will be soon on the screen. I am happy to introduce them to you, and I would like to start now, not in alphabetical order as I usually do, but I think I do it in terms of time zones. And we start very early. I think it is 5 o'clock in New York, where we meet Dr. Stephanie Warmington. We have just woken her up and asked her to join us today. Stephanie is the manager of the Global Strategic Research and senior research scientist at the Center for Creative Leadership. She is a developmental scientist, and she has really a great expertise in educational psychology and developmental trajectories. So, Stephanie, you have a PhD in educational psychology and education technology, and you really focus your work in helping students and young professionals navigating key life transitions and identifying also contextual barriers when it comes to success on an individual level, on a group level, organizational level, and societal level. And that fits entirely with the concept of this Young Leaders Summit, where we focus on self-leadership, team leadership, and societal leadership. In this context, I would like to highlight that Stephanie has been a key driver with the ASEF Edu team of this ASEM Youth Report. So her expertise and insights on the Youth Report will be much appreciated in our discussion. And then next, we move a few hours to the, I think, pre-lunch time to Europe, where I greet Alvaro Gonzalez Perez. Is from Spain, but I think currently based in Brussels. Alvaro is a known activist and youth worker in the European youth scene for several years, almost a decade. He held various leadership positions in the civil society sector. You were vice president of IG and board member of the Generation Climate Europe, and currently you are a consultant and trainer for international youth NGOs and focus mainly on the topics of policy, advocacy, youth rights, and sustainability. Also, Alvaro supported us in the development of the Youth Report. He was conceptualizing, leading the focus group sessions, interviews with individuals, which contributed also to really in-depth insights for us. Then we are moving to Cambodia, and I'm happy to to have on board an ASEFYLS4 Young Leader, Sok Nyang Sam. We can also call her Jo during this meeting. Jo, you just moved from Hungary to Cambodia. You graduated in food engineering at Debrecen University in Hungary. You focus on sustainability in production and entrepreneurship, and you're now working on a startup initiative in Cambodia to develop edible insect products to increase their acceptability in the EU and global markets. Thank you for being with us today. And last but not least, somebody who is representing one of the largest youth organizations probably worldwide. I'm happy to have Ling Xiao with us, who is the Vice President of the All China Youth Federation and also the President of the All China Students Federation. Ling Xiao, you are currently doing your PhD at the School of Economics and Management at Tsinghua University. You have a background in engineering as well from the same university, and you have really dedicated for quite some time your time for volunteering and to serve young generations in China and help them to develop their full potential. You have been, as a Vice President of All China Youth Federation, you promote also the reform of the student union in China since 2020. And here the focus is really on enhancing the students' union's ability to serve students and contribute to society. So wonderful to have you all with us today. Let me give a short background on the ASEM Youth Report. I have to say that we invited you today. It's more an appetizer because the final report you will be able to read tomorrow. But today we want to really build up the process and share with you a few key insights, but more like the concepts which are behind this youth report. Because the question is, why do we do a youth report now at this time and as part of the Young Leaders Summit? So first of all, the Young Leaders Summit, as I mentioned before, focuses on self-leadership, team leadership, and societal leadership towards sustainable development in a post-COVID-19 world. And this world needs ethical global citizens to shape our future. That's number one. Number two, we know that the young adults possess the global mindset which is needed to spur and really to bring forward this global change which is needed. And third, despite this great potential which we have, young people remain underrepresented in leadership and decision-making conversations. And last but not least, if we want to engage young people as current and future global leaders, we must first learn about their experiences and aspirations and see what's the status quo. So what were our leading questions in this youth report? Question number one was, how are young people engaging with leadership across ASEM countries? A second question was, what are the incentives and disincentives for young people to take part in leadership? And lastly, our recommendations, because we don't only want to learn, we want also to look forward and then see how we can apply our learning. What are promising ways to incentivize and design meaningful leadership experiences for young people? A quick update about the methodology. So we are really proud that we worked with the Center for Creative Leadership on this first publication on youth leadership in ASEM. We have conducted an ASEM-wide survey between February and July 2021 across all the 51 ASEM countries and were able to gather 13,676 responses. So these are all youth voices responses on leadership experiences and aspirations, and these responses form the basis of our report. In addition to that, we had focus group discussions and interviews to go more in-depth because obviously majority of these responses were the questionnaire were so quantitative questions, but here we also went into a qualitative analysis to find out more. So tomorrow evening at the end of the ASEF Young Leaders Summit, we are hoping that you will be all on our website and social media and you download the report for in-depth details and see what are the opportunities and barriers. But for today, we give you some little bits and pieces to make you more curious and also to hear really from our youth leaders now how they see the situation and how they assess some of the insights which we have gathered from the youth report. I would like to ask and I would like to start with an easy question to all of you. Talking about leadership, and there's a big fuss about the leadership term in general, but what does it actually mean to you? and how does your organization or how does your work strengthen and facilitate youth leadership? And I start with, I think we can do the geographical round first and start in the morning hours in the US. Stephanie, please.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for the introduction and for having me here. I'll try to keep this brief. The Center for Creative Leadership, as indicated by our name, we think about leadership and what it means a lot. For me, leadership is less about a position and more about the actions that one takes. It's the actions and the influence that you have on others to create a sustainable future. In terms of how we support that, we really think about leadership as a collective action. So we try to support individuals working collectively with others to make a sustainable change. And our mission, which we try to carry out day to day in everything that we do, is to help everyone see the potential for themselves to become a leader, either in formal or informal settings. So that's really our mission. We try to embody it every single day, but the real takeaway for us is that there's no one position or no one place that you need to be in to become a leader. You can be a leader in everything you do every day. It's really about the actions that you take and the intentions that you have.
Thanks, Stephanie, for giving us a first food for thoughts for today. Alvaro, how would you define leadership?
Yes, thank you. Well, I was just thinking also that in my definition, I've been clearly influenced by the CCL, probably working with you over the past months had something to do with it. That from my side, I would define it as optimizing the resources and efforts that are brought about by a group of people with the purpose of reaching not just any goal, but actually a commonly agreed goal. And the way in which I actually work on facilitating youth leadership, well, I am working as a freelance trainer and consultant, and using the non-formal education methodology. And basically one of the main components of non-formal education methodology is facilitating peer-to-peer learning. It's enabling people to discover actually their own competencies. So it's not just about basically the trainer or let's say the educator giving knowledge, but also allowing for the participants and the people that are taking part in this educational process to actually realize what they already know. So it's also a lot about, if I had to choose one word, about enabling.
Thank you. Soknyan, what's your take on the question?
Thank you, Leonie. Thank you for the question. And it's really great to see everyone here and as well our participants today. For me, leadership, it's like to describe it in a really simple way. Imagine you are like a tour guide and then you know a specific area, you are a local tour guide, and then you are going to lead a group of tourists. And so it's just actually like to reach a destination with them, with knowing how and when and where to do that. So that's the definition for leadership for me. And a part of the work in the organizations, as you see, I involved in most of the Zero Hunger projects. So the startup within Edible Insect, and as well now I'm working as a freelance as well as a partnership managers at Thought for Food, where we actually encourage young people, especially university students, to have more opportunity in food innovation. So they are actually the leaders in the zero hunger sector, and as well finding the solutions and promote sustainability. Thank you.
Thank you. So it's about obviously the destination, but to collectively reach this destination, and it obviously is a destination which can benefit all. It's not only for one. Ling Xiao.
Okay, thank you very much for the introduction, and nice to meet you all. I think a leader should first connect with others deeply, so that the leader can know what others need and what others want to do. And then they need to serve for others' needs. And the third step is to motivate others to work together and set a goal and a mission for the organization. So I think this is a leader should do. And then just take it myself, for example, I myself used to work for the Student Union of Tsinghua University, and I'm working for All China Youth Federation and All China Students Federation. Have organized or participated in challenge competition, various kinds of social practice, and in training student union volunteers. And I think in these organizations, we take youth development and youth leadership nurturing seriously. So these organizations will provide opportunities for young people to participate in various social activities, just like what I mentioned before. In these activities, young people will learn how to cooperate with others and lead a team. Thank you.
Thank you. We had, apologies, as part of our Young Leaders Summit, a wonderful leadership training also by the Center for Creative Leadership. And the focus was very much also on like getting the team on board for one joint direction with one sustainable outcome at the end. So we had in our survey, of course, the question, what are the characteristics of a good leader? And there were a number of characteristics listed, and as the outcome we had a good leader has to be disciplined, hardworking, creative, capable, and knowledgeable. So that was for a good leader. And then we asked the same question, or a similar question, asked what are the characteristics of an ethical leader? And here they focused on a lot of things which you have actually mentioned: empathy, integrity, engaging, fair, selfless. So that's more like a focus on the benefit for all. So should not all good leaders be also ethical leaders? Why do you think is there some discrepancy in these answers, that when people hear good leader, then they focus rather on these more, still a little bit standardized or typical, I wouldn't say old-fashioned leadership characteristics, but the ethical component is not immediately highlighted. Any comments on this? Maybe we start with Stephanie, because you did the analysis also of that report.
I did, and I've thought about this a lot, being able to really look at the data. And one of the places that I'm really landing is that when you think about leadership, it's really a journey, right? So there are different ways of becoming a leader, and then what you do once you're in a formal or informal leadership position. So I'm wondering if the focus for the good leader, being a good leader, is part of the characteristics that you need to embody to become a leader, to really step into that leadership role. And when we ask about an ethical leader, the responses are reflecting what you have to really use or really tap into to be able to respond in ethical ways to ambiguous situations. So I'm wondering if the way that we frame the question, being a good leader versus being an ethical leader, maybe thinking about broadly, what do I need to be good in a leadership role? And then for ethical, what do I need to really tap into when I'm in situations where ethics really need to take the forefront?
Thank you. Seeing that slowly, like young people are getting more opportunities in leadership, are more engaged, and the topic is also currently quite on the agenda amongst the Asian European youth community. Alvaro, do you think that the focus will be more and more towards ethical leadership in the future?
Well, I would say definitely, especially when we see leadership in civil society as being represented, especially in, let's say, in the meaningful representation of young people and institutional, let's say, process or basically organizations. But I was just thinking also, why would that be? Like, why would there be this difference also between good and ethical? I didn't think of, let's say, a regional difference between Europe and Asia, but something that came to my mind is that it might be that a good leader is perceived, at least among these respondents, as someone who is actually reaching the goal, because there are situations in which perhaps making a decision in which you are reaching a full consensus among everyone involved in the process might take too much time to the point that you are not able to actually reach the goal in the time that you are trying to build that consensus. Whereas an ethical person, an ethical leader, I think all these words about, for instance, being empathetic is very much not just reflected on the goal that you are reaching, but also the process that you are living. So I would say perhaps good leader is perceived as something more goal-oriented process, and an ethical leader more as in taking every step of the process into account.
I would love to hear now the answers from our Asian colleagues. Maybe we start with Ling Xiao.
And I also read the report and I have some thought about this question. I think when people are asking about these two questions, they may come about two different types of leaders. One, for good leader standards may be to lead a team and achieve the goal of the organization. And when we think about an ethical leader, maybe the standard is to treat people with empathy and not to harm others, harm other organizations, or so on. But I think a good leader should also be the ethical leaders, especially in the post-COVID-19 world we are now in. No matter the urgent need for sustainable development and green development modes, or the severe situation in the world's containment of COVID-19, these are all world problems that need young leaders to cooperate to achieve. And I think young leaders nowadays can not only care about their own benefits. So I think being ethical is a necessary thing for future leaders.
Thank you. Soknyan.
Well, actually, very, very good answer from all the panelists here. I just try what else to add on to this on-point topic, actually. But one thing I would point out when I heard the question, it's actually kind of confusing whether you are already a good leader. That's how you have discipline and like hardworking and creativity with yourself. But to become an ethical, you put more empathy in that. So I was thinking, what's the difference between the two leaders? But actually, I was thinking, if you are a good leader, why not become an ethical leader at the same time? So if comparing to a working environment, you might choose ethical leader. Why? Because there are actually fair and selfless in the working environment. So which means if we say in an environment where we are working or achieving the goals together, where fair and respectfulness are spread into this environment. So it's self-sustained place for people. So even those who are not really into this leading thing, they know their value in a specific place area. So they know their value at that place. So that's how they choose more in that. But yep, that would be my answer to add on. Thank you.
Thank you so much. We had a previous ASEF Young Leaders Summit on ethical leadership. We are aware it's a very philosophical question as well. And it's probably also a tough question at the beginning of this panel discussion. So I'll go now a little bit more on the practical question, make it maybe a little bit easier, but I also would like to encourage our audience, if you have any questions on leadership, self-leadership, team leadership, society leadership, comments, if you want to find out more about the work the organizations are doing or our individuals who are on the panel are doing in this field, please post it here as well, and I take them as soon as I see them in the chat. So one of the key focus areas of the report was really to find out what are the opportunities for young people and what are also incentives and disincentives for young people to take up leadership roles, and where do we, however, have barriers. So maybe each of you can share your observation on opportunities and barriers, but also incentives and disincentives, which is a little bit different in its definition. You can give some practical examples from your region, from your country. And maybe we can start the other way around now with Ling Xiao. How is it in China? I have to congratulate you. I mean, being president or vice president for the All China Youth Federation is a tremendous opportunity, looking also at the number of young people which you are supporting with your organization. What are the opportunities which you see for youth leadership in China? How are they engaged? What does drive them to take up leadership roles? But what are also barriers where it's difficult to get the youth voice really into decision-making processes?
Okay, thank you. Based on my observation, I think the opportunities can be divided into two parts. It's formal opportunities and informal opportunities. Just take it's, for example, firstly, I would like to introduce some formal institutions in China for the young people to engage in the leadership roles. In China, young people can be elected the representative of People's Congress and People's Political Consultative Conference. at different levels, just from local to national. And students, just like us in universities in China, can also become the representatives of the Student Congress. And through the Congress or different kinds from local to national Congress, we can propose our advice for decision making and make a change for the society. There are many different proposals for the Congress now. And also there are some other organizations as well. I myself was elected the leader of our student union. And then I just joined the All China Youth Federation and All China Students Federation. And later I come as a representative of ASEF. I think China gave us young people lots of opportunities for us to lead, for us or try to in different kinds of opportunities. And as for informal institutions, young people in China can become volunteers in all kinds of social activities. Just take it for example, many young people, including myself, have contributed to the containment of COVID-19 since 2020 as a volunteer. In this voluntary work, we just learned about how to organize efficient and satisfying vaccination service. I think it's a hard thing to do. I think this process is of great growth to us volunteers and to myself. This is for the opportunities, and then I want just to talk about the barriers. First, I think the pressure on study and on the life may reduce the time and efforts young people nowadays will put in the leadership roles. And I think the second, we the youth are all recognized as Generation Z, digital natives. And I think as the vice president of the Youth Federation, I feel pity that some young people just decide to spend much time on social network, and then they just lack the awareness to connect with others in real life. They just isolate online life with real life, so which prevents them from taking up leadership roles. So I think young people in the world need to realize that they need to take the responsibility for the society and serve for others. So there needs to be better platforms for young people to take up leadership roles. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you. If I understood you correctly, so one has to be careful not to be distracted by too many things left and right, and not waste opportunities to take up leadership roles. Is that what your recommendation is? Can I? Yes, is that what you're referring to?
Yeah. I also think that we need to focus on the real life, but not online life or some other things, and then we could focus our time to the leadership roles nowadays. Yeah.
Thank you. As you're also have a leading role in the All China Student Federation.
Yeah,
could you let us? Thank you. Could you let us know how, for example, because I asked afterwards Alvaro, who comes from a European student association, how are students, for example, engaged in university life and, for example, their decision-making processes? Because this is a target group which we have in ASEF Edu, and a lot of our young people who have responded to this survey are also student leaders. That's what they have indicated. So can you share a few practical examples how in your capacity you have really an impact on university life and on student life?
You mean that the students in China, how to engage in the leadership roles, right? Just students?
No, I'm asking in your capacity of as a student leader as well. How are the opportunities here for students to have a say in university life, in possible policies in higher education, reform in higher education? That's also what you're focusing on, I understood. Can you share a few practical examples here?
Yeah, I understand. Just take I just mentioned that the students in China could become representative of the Student Congress. And this Student Congress has many different procedures. The most important task for the Student Congress and then be the representative is to put advice and put suggestions for the school. We just maybe just take the course, for example, when maybe students need better courses, need to better school environments, or need to solve some just basic problems around us, the light, the shower, or some other things. And then the students need to talk about it and then cooperate others and propose a proposal. So I think this student congress is a very important way for students to just think about what they should do to change or to improve their life and improve the society's life. Yeah. I think student congress is example, and some other voluntary work, of course, it is. We will provide some voluntary work opportunities for different students of different types about social practice just around the world. Maybe before the COVID-19, we were to went to different countries to let them know what the other countries look like, and maybe there are some specific topics of the social practice just to dig deep into it. Yeah.
Thank you so much. I hand over to Alvaro as a former student leader. I know that you are having several hats in the, or had several hats in that sector, but also youth sector in general. How do you see here the opportunities, but also barriers for European youth to make their voice heard, to engage and really to be part of decision-making process?
Yes, thank you, Leonie. Well, first of all, I just wanted to indicate that from what I'm going to talk about is coming from the civil society sector, which is where I have engaged on and I have related to most when it comes to leadership. And what I have seen, and I think it's an interesting regional perspective, because I was also working quite a lot on Asian countries while also working with ASEF, is that in comparison in general with Asian countries, the perception that I had is that youth participation structures in Europe are quite institutionalized. And with this, I mean that that happens by either official and independent youth representative bodies. So normally, let's say, National Youth Council when it comes at national level, or through structured policy processes to gather the views of young people. So for instance, there's this process, I don't know how many of you are aware of it, it's called the EU Youth Dialogue, and this is a process that happens yearly and that it basically gathers the views and opinions of young people, either directly or through the different youth representative bodies from the European Union on specific topics that are part of the EU Youth Strategy, which is the official, let's say, strategy on the side of the European Union when it comes to youth policies. And this per se doesn't have to be necessarily linked to leadership, but something that I noticed while working on the youth report is that the perception on opportunities on leadership for young people is also very much linked and goes hand by hand with youth participation opportunities in the country. So I definitely believe that having these kind of opportunities to engage as a young person, first of all, empowers in order to basically stand up and give your opinion. And secondly, it also pushes you at the same time to actually take a leadership role. So in this sense, I would say that in Europe, that is an opportunity. Nonetheless, this doesn't come without a barrier. So I don't want to say that this is all, let's say, beautiful and it's always like meaningful, because it is not the case. So another issue that I see here, and this is actually something that I also saw during some focus groups and interviews, is that some young people might actually, even if they have this information, even if they know about these structures, they don't want to take part in them, because there's also a perception of youth washing. There's also a perception of, okay, there are these processes going on, and young people can give their opinion, but what are the decision makers or policy makers going to do with this opinion? In many cases, like, this goes nowhere. So it is perceived actually as a youth washing, let's say, process, and that it has a lack of impact. But certainly, if I have to point out at the biggest barrier of all, and I would say the results of the report also confirm this, it would be socio-economic barriers. So in the civil society sector, when you want to engage in it, normally you don't start directly, let's say, on let's say high-level positions or in paid positions for those who dedicate themselves professionally to it, but you start volunteering. And something that I've learned over the years is that volunteering is actually a luxury. It's not something that anyone can do. I mean, of course, when you volunteer on something, it's something that you believe in, it's something that you are passionate about. But at the end of the day, it's a luxury, because not everyone has the time to actually invest time on what they love, because perhaps they have to study and work at the same time. And this is not something that I mention very often, but I actually do not come from a very privileged background, even though, I mean, I'm a white man from West. All these privileges I do have, but socioeconomically, I don't come from a privileged background. And I was lucky enough that at the time that I was starting volunteering, I actually found a very well-paid job. And this allowed me to actually also dedicate myself to this kind of, let's say, volunteering roles that in the end has become my passion and today my profession as well. But this is the case for many, many people. And this happens in Europe, this happens in Asia. And I would say that this is one of the bases and one of the biggest barriers for young people to, in the end, not just to engage in participation structures, but to engage in any kind of leadership.
This is a fantastic point, Alvaro. And I would like to ask Stephanie first to comment on it, because we had a question also in our youth report on financial background, and if your financial background has an impact for you taking up a leadership role. That's number one. At the same time, we also had a result in the youth report, what actually brings you forward in terms of leadership. And there's a very strong connection between volunteering and leadership. And that's probably a challenge which we have to overcome. So first to Stephanie, and then I would like to ask Soknian if she also thinks that volunteering is not even though wanted, not as easy as it could be, even though if you want to volunteer. Yeah, Stephanie.
Absolutely. No, Alvaro, I feel like you set this up perfectly for what we asked in the report. Let me start with the volunteering point. So whether or not someone was a current volunteer was actually one of the strongest predictors of whether or not you were in a leadership position. So those who are currently in a leadership position were about 5.5 times more likely to currently volunteer than those who were aspiring to become leaders in the future or were not interested in becoming a leader in the future. That held when we controlled for financial security. The way that we asked that question was less about your actual annual income or your family income, and more about whether or not you felt like you could make ends meet, or you felt that you didn't have to worry about money. If we look at the financial security question, it's really interesting. If you felt less financially secure, so if you said that you could not make ends meet or you worried about money quite a bit, you were less likely to be a leader. And that makes a lot of sense, especially from what we heard in focus groups. If you're worried about putting food on the table for your family or being able to have secure housing for yourself, you may not be thinking as much about whether or not you want to step into a leadership role, or like Alvaro said, you want to engage in that luxury of volunteering. So I think that financial security is something that we really need to consider. We consider a lot of different things that may affect whether or not someone decides to step into a leadership role. Financial security is really key. And Alvaro, I think you're hitting on a really important point that volunteering takes time and energy. And if your time and energy is focused on other things like being financially secure, you may not have that time and energy to put toward volunteering. So I think that's something that we need to consider. And I think there's also an opportunity to reconsider what meaningful volunteering might look like. There are some things that take a lot of time and energy. Are there opportunities to make a really meaningful impact without having as much investment of time or energy or money as some volunteering opportunities may have? So everything that Alvaro said, we're finding support for that in the young people that we heard from.
Thank you, Stephanie, for giving us first insights from the report. I always refer to you to give us these little appetizers and key points. Soknian, you had an interesting comment in the chat. Being a volunteer during high school or university was like being a superstar when you were a student in Cambodia. Okay, so were you able to be a superstar? Do you also think it was you were in a privileged position to volunteer? Can you share a little bit more about this comment?
Yeah, thank you, Leonie. Actually, when Alvaro mentioned about volunteering, it brought back the memory, you know, because here in Cambodia, the volunteer opportunity, it's really not so much but you gotta meet like young people who are doing volunteer outside their high school or university. And even right now, some of the people I met like randomly, and then they know one of my friend, and I asked them, how did you know my friend? It was like, oh, we volunteer together. Yeah, that's how I met the participant during the summit here as well. So and if you ask them why you go for volunteer, they was like, most of the answer would be like, I don't know, I just saw my friend go to that event, so I just volunteer as well. So one thing I got to understand was actually the power of actually like knowing people. So it's like connection. So you know someone doing this, you want to do it as well. And to think about connecting to leadership, you are a leader, but you are going to work with people. You are not going to lead the plant or something. You work with people. So the more people you know, like the more experience you gain, and the more idea, or how to say, like you break some layer from your own comfort zone, and you got to meet more and explore more of that one. And so that's why. And the reason why I say like being a volunteer during your university or when you were a high school student, it's like feels so special, because everyone look at you, because this opportunity is kind of rare. And when you go there as a volunteer, and then you saw some people you know, you feel so cool, like look at me, I'm working on this, I'm doing something good for the environment, my society. So that's how I felt at that time. And and one thing I got really surprised was the diverse of youth opportunity right now. Regarding to this is that I saw 4 years ago, I was a student here in Cambodia, but then I went to Hungary to pursue my education. And then I came back, I saw like really different. We have a lot of youth opportunity. We have the Union of Youth Federations, as well as the partner of the summit as well. And that's how they gather like a community of youth and do some kind of social activity together. And it's really impactful for youth. And that's what something I find, I'm really amazed of that. And a perfect example would be this summit, because it gave the opportunity to young people like me, like other my fellow participant as well. So this is a perfect example how we can actually give more opportunity, try to improve more, and bringing people like to understand what the role of leadership. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Sonia. I think it's very encouraging to hear that volunteering in your cultural context brings so much recognition, which is very often not the case for volunteering, and you experienced it as the right platform to connect for further growth. Ling Xiao, you mentioned earlier a lot of young people are too much distracted, but you have a large group of volunteers in the All China Youth Federation. What are the incentives here for them to join? And do you also think that volunteering is for many rather a privilege in China? What is maybe you can share a little bit also the structure, the diversity of the youth volunteers which are represented by your organization.
Okay, thank you. And I think, firstly, I think just as Sing-Song says, volunteering itself, it means a peer-to-peer support for us, especially in the universities or in some social organizations. Through voluntary work, we can chat with or cooperate with others, communicate with others. Then we just get peer-to-peer support about the leadership itself. So I think the peer-to-peer support, basically it itself means a reason why many young people join the voluntary work. And then second, I think is the voluntary work itself, because just take the National Congress, I think just take the All China Student Congress, Student Federation, for example, we just has been many types of voluntary work. Maybe everyone could find its interest in one type of voluntary work. Of course, it's about sports or some just music or some other just large show, the volunteers for the large show or a large ceremony or some other things. And I think everyone could get its interest in one specific type of voluntary work. And through this voluntary work, on the one hand, he can may just get its interest and feel a very get very interest into the itself, and then through the voluntary work, he can communicate, cooperate, or may set the goal, or just organize others to make contribution to this mission or to this goal. So I think the first is the voluntary itself is a platform for young people to connect with others, and then itself is a very important chance for us to grow and to learn some many other just abilities. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you so much. In the context of volunteering, and we ask in that youth report, not a question, but we focus also on informal leadership, which obviously is much more in the volunteering sector than in the in formal sectors. So I would like to hear first from Alvaro, because you are engaged in the civil society sector and very much in the informal non-formal education sector. What is the importance of having a leadership role in that sector later for leadership roles which are very formalized? What can people learn through this non-formal, informal leadership? Which is not possible to learn at a later stage anymore? Are there certain skills, competencies?
Just to clarify, when you say non-formal or informal leadership, you mean the leadership positions within civil society organizations?
No, I mean volunteering positions which are not designated through, I mean, your regular workplace, really volunteering.
All right. Well, to be honest, I mean, I clearly have a bias because I also want to work in this sector. But what I've seen and I've noticed is that there's a certain flexibility here that makes it sort of especially when it comes to youth civil society, when you also start volunteering at an early age, it makes it sort of a playground to learn as well. But don't get me wrong, when I call it a playground, I don't, because it looks like it's also not professional. Something that I've also seen is I have had the opportunity to learn. I have had the opportunity to engage in the structures or in projects or initiatives that I wouldn't have had the opportunity to engage in if I wasn't volunteering, if I wasn't here, if I hadn't been. I mean, but nonetheless, like the level of professionalism, the level of quality efficiency is actually extremely high, and in many cases, I don't know, I've seen other perhaps companies or even in the corporate world that there are certain processes, or even when it comes to leadership or management, that I think they would benefit a lot from what let's say I've seen or I've witnessed in the civil society sector, especially when it comes to ethical leadership, because when you are volunteering, you are doing it out of passion, you are doing it out of something that you believe in. Having or finding, let's say, this kind of authoritarian leadership models that are not at all, let's say, what would be defining ethical leadership. You can find it, of course, but I think it's much harder. So I think the kind of leadership models that I would summarize it by saying that I think the kind of leadership models that you find in civil society sector are quite close to what I would define as ethical leadership, and this is something that I personally apply very much today in my work as a professional, and definitely what I've learned today, or what I'm the skills and knowledge that I'm applying into or competencies that I'm applying into my day-to-day work. The sheer majority of them, including, let's say, leadership, I've learned it in volunteering and civil society roles.
Thank you. I think your term playground can be translated to maybe safe platform, and that's what volunteering or these kind of leadership roles in the not formal sector offer you. It's a safe platform, a safe space to try out and to grow without, and you can fall, and you have, and I see it in the chat, you have your peer-to-peer network and support which catches you and then jointly brings you up again. Ling Xiao, maybe you can comment on this as well. What are you hoping and expecting your volunteers in your organization to learn? And is this then more recognized in the formal sector and in the professional sector once they have a volunteering label from the All China Youth Federation? How does it help them for their future career path?
Okay, thank you. And I think the voluntary work is a type of informal leadership roles, I think. And this informal leadership role, just as the voluntary work of different types, can make preparations for the formal leadership roles. And I just think this voluntary work could provide many different chances and different types of chances for young people to improve their leading ability and make them build confidence. And for example, as I mentioned, I used to be a volunteer in the vaccination service for university students. I think it's a very fantastic experience, and let me know how to cooperate or make an innovation to the service or to the contamination of the COVID-19. And I think under the instruction of maybe the experts in the voluntary work or the cooperation between others, communication between others, we can learn about and improve our understanding of social work, of different types of voluntary work. So I think this experience of informal leadership or the voluntary work can help us to build more confidence and organize other large-scale activities later. So I think it's maybe a preparation for the future, more important, larger important, and maybe need to more difficult, more different types of abilities of formal leadership roles. Yeah.
Thank you. I'm looking at the time, I'm looking at the chat. The time tells me 10 more minutes. The chat tells me no questions from the audience. So that hopefully means that you're listening very attentively. Because there's a lot of perspectives views here shared currently. And I want to go back to the beginning of our session when I mentioned that we have 3 youth representatives at the summit delivering a declaration. And we heard the keyword, Alvaro mentioned it, of youth washing. And that was something which our young leaders have also highlighted in their youth declaration, that we really need to have a structured dialogue, we need to have meaningful participation, and we need to jointly work, the youth, political leaders, and anybody who is in power to ensure that there is no youth washing. Over the past weeks, with the COP happening, there was also that term coined again. Just a few thoughts maybe from all of you. Have you experienced personally youth washing in your with your organization, with your work in practice, and what can be done to move from youth washing really to proper youth engagement, because that's where we want to, that's our destination of youth leadership. Who wants to start? Maybe Stephanie, would you like to start? Because it was also in the youth report a comment.
It was in the youth report. I'll start with my personal experience, though. I am blessed with a face that looks much younger than I am. I'm just outside of our 18 to 30-year-old range. So I've experienced quite a bit of youth washing personally, from when I was quite young to where I am in my career now. I feel like usually when I enter into conversations, there is a starting point of thinking, this person's just here to be, a face and really not to give any sort of opinion or have my voice be heard. At first, that was very alienating for me. I found it very difficult to speak up. And over time, especially with the help of some mentors that I still keep in touch with, I chose to see it as a challenge. So as I went into conversations and people didn't really think I had anything to add, I chose to see it as a challenge to really bring myself into the conversation and make a difference. And I'm able to do that because of a lot of privilege on my side. So I felt it personally. Sitting in the United States, I see it quite a bit with the young leaders that I work with. And part of the conversation that we have is, what is it within your control to try to change the narrative around what your place is in certain conversations, even if the door isn't open for you to be able to have your voice be heard, to make a meaningful difference, to be involved in decision-making conversations. And then part of my work that's really wonderful is working with those who are in positions of power, who aren't, who might be unintentionally youth washing, to really open their eyes to, why are you having this young person in the conversation? Have you created opportunities for them to really make a difference, to really have their voice be heard? Why are they there? So not just having someone there to, you know, be a happy face, to feel like you're being inclusive, but just with little quotations around it. But how do you really have them be part of the conversation as someone who is a really important stakeholder?
I see the other panelists nodding their heads, so it looks like you know what Stephanie is talking about. You might have similar experiences, and Stephanie said a mentor is somebody who could help overcoming this and giving you like the right drive and putting you in the right platform where you are not considered, where youth is not considered as cute, or where you are not just there to be the inclusive element. Sognia, would you like to comment on that?
Yeah, about actually, I knocked my head more when you mentioned about the youth opportunity when you are in a situation where you feel like you're younger than them, you don't have, you know, the encourage to speak up, something like that. One of my experience, it was a really meaningful experience. I joined some kind of competition, and there was a gap about academy background because I was a second-year student, and there were two lecturers who have 10-year experience in teaching in our team, but we are in a competition. So I felt so bad because of my background, and like I couldn't find it encouraged to speak up. What should we do? Like I have an idea, I want to speak up, but then I come up with an idea. Yeah, just because I'm young, I'm here, and I'm going to use it as my power because I'm young. I'm going to challenge it. So that's why I speak up. And they're like, okay, great idea. We appreciate that. Let's do that. So and then we found the idea, the project idea, and then we had an incredible experience. So one thing I would like to just a great point here, and as well as a youth representative here, is like use the word young as your how to say, your power right now, just because yes, that's our empowerment moment right now, the fruitful thing. So always use it. Do it because you are young, and you don't know it because you are young, and you want to learn it. You want to grow because you are young. So yeah, that's why I want to add in this point.
Sure, I hand over to you. Youth washing, has it been an issue, something you have experienced, something which your organization is trying to overcome? And if so, how?
Hey, Julie, are you for me? Yeah.
Yes.
Okay. Sorry. And I think I haven't experienced youth watching personally or in practice, but I really think that maybe in some situations, you young people maybe face many people older than me, or they may know more things, may just do not dare to, or feel free to, or maybe we do not express our view actively. So I think this is part of the reason why maybe we just feel like this is youth working. So I think we all need to think about the problem is that how to build a mechanism that the young people could play an indispensable role in the process of decision making, or in the process of a specific the right way to pursue the goal, or something other things. So this mechanism or could guarantee that the youth works. I think that if we could know that our voice means the voice of the new generation, the youngest generation. If we know that our voice will work, maybe the phenomenon of youth working will diminish in the future. So.
Thank you. A few years ago, we had the term youth up. We need to use up. Now we have the term youth washing. Alvaro, what is the context on the European side here?
Yes, I actually would like to resonate with something that Stephanie said, which is for me to identify whether there's actually youth washing happening or not, is to ask, why are young people there? I think if you ask that question, you can really realize, and in my opinion, I have this, I mean, I also work specifically, let's say, on youth policies and then youth representation. So, I mean, I am very much in direct contact with that, but still precisely because of this, perhaps I should experience it less. And I have actually witnessed that many times, that I had the feeling that there were events or processes where young people were invited to tick a box. And I'm talking of events not just, let's say, on a topic that was not specifically just on youth, but let's say on a topic or on policies, whatever that was the tackling a different topic, and they wanted to invite a youth representative, and it was really to tick a box. And especially, I think it's something that I've seen this quite a lot when it comes to climate and environmental policy making. So I've also been involved quite a lot over the past 2 years on that, and took place in several conferences or processes, on also specifically, let's say, on youth inclusion in environmental policy making or intergeneration equity on the topic. And this is where I think I've experienced it the most. I mean, I think it's quite renowned that the youth climate movement has become quite prominent over the past 2 years, and I do believe that this is something that also, let's say, policymakers are trying to exploit, in the sense of, hey, we are listening to a very important part of the table, to the future generations that are going to face the biggest consequences on the topic, but still, in many cases, let's say the discussions that happened there didn't lead to any meaningful conclusion. It was just to have the youth, let's say, represented there or viewed there, but not with any, let's say, specific follow-up. And the thing is, one conclusion on this and one last point on this is that I really believe that these are things that need to be pointed out, especially when it comes to, I mean, in my case, again, I talk about civil society, but I think, like, if we don't point out at this is never going to change, either by these people not being empowered to actually speak up and say, hey, maybe it's not my problem, maybe I'm actually valid, and it's not my issue, but also when it comes to meaningfully involve young people as a whole.
Thank you. I want to close today with, again, a survey statistic, and we asked, what are the top 5 reasons for you, for the youth, to be a leader? And the first one was to be a role model for my community. The second one is to make a contribution to society. The third one is learn things that will help me make a positive impact in the world. Number 4, expand my understanding of the world. And number 5 is help others. And that brings us back to the very beginning of the question of ethical leader, because that sounds very much like true ethical leadership and sustainability. And I want you to answer with one word my question. If young people take these motivations, which they have listed here, into their current or future leadership roles, do you think that we will be able to see a global change towards more equity and inclusion in our societies, as well as sustainable development? Yes or no? Stephanie, you start. I think there's only one answer, no?
Yes.
Alvaro?
Yes, definitely.
Ling Xiao?
Yeah, definitely yes.
Soc-Miang?
Yes, definitely and absolutely.
Thank you for this. We hope that our youth report will contribute its part to stronger youth engagement, more meaningful youth engagement in the relevant bodies and towards sustainable development. I thank you for being with us today. And tomorrow we will see more in our publication. We have also another session. Our last session tomorrow is on climate action. And then we have our Young Leaders Summit closing. It was an absolute pleasure to have you with us today, to learn from you, to hear a little bit bits and there about differences, but also commonalities and from Asia and Europe and the youth sector. And I wish everyone from Singapore a good evening. To the US, a very good morning, happy new day as well. Same for Alvaro in Europe. And to Soc-Miang and Ling Xiao, good evening. Thank you for the audience for being with us today. Good night.
Okay, like